Hey, this is part two of taking a look at inner child work. So if you haven't listened to part one, go listen to that first and then pop back in here and join us for the rest of our discussion on this important topic.
Let's talk about what intuition really is.
Let's look at all the places intuition and ego show up in your life.
Let's share honestly.
Let's do the research.
I'm Jamie Hayhurst.
I'm Heather Wood.
This is the Intuitive Girl's Guide.
Describe your inner child.
Mm-hmm.
I really do recommend writing this down, even if you're not a writer of
Mhm.
things. Like, that's not your best thing. Just once, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But
Mhm.
like, have some words to like describe who they were. Like,
Mhm.
what do they act like? What do they want all the time? What kind of things do they advocate for? Like, what's your inner child asking you for all the time?
Right.
Okay. So I figured I'd tell you mine and then ask you yours, Jamie, because I think one of the feedback we get from listeners a lot is that they like when we talk about ourselves on tangents.
I know. I always worry that they're like, "What the fuck
Me
are
too.
you talking about yourself
do.
all the time?"
I
and
get
then
that,
people
like-
are like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that was the best part."
Yeah, I get that like ruminating thing after we record, and I'm like, why did I tell that story for so long? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, I do that.
I know what you
But
mean.
then people will say like, oh my God, I related to that, or
Yes.
that helped me. So
Right.
So here it is.
Okay.
You asked for it.
Yep.
It's your fault, guys.
Some of you did at least.
So for me, if I'm describing my inner child, I'm going to say words like whimsy, weirdness, otherworldly things. She loved that. Fun, silly, likes to play, imagination, stories, and flowers. Those are the things, if I was to describe her in a few words, that's what she was like.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the good thing about that is, one, it helps you know what connects to your inner child and what they feel like, but it also helps you conjure them, because you can just grab onto one of those traits and sit in it, and you'll
Right.
feel that part of you.
Gotcha.
How would you describe your? I feel like it's going to be a little less like earth fairy than mine.
Well, I mean, I think this actually is going to fully illustrate why you might want to find a therapist
Oh.
when you're doing inner child work.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yours isn't going to be whimsy and
no,
flowers.
so mine would have been like very emotional,
Mm-hmm.
like very like feelings. Like I was
Yes.
always feeling things.
Yep.
I was silly.
Yep.
But at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
my inner child is profoundly lonely.
Yep.
Like incredibly lonely.
Yep.
And so that's where the work is.
Yeah. And you know, I think it's important when you go and look at this stuff to find the things where it's like, this is how she's hurt. So like,
Right.
my inner child would say like, she's rejected. Right. Like it would be some form of, which like lonely and abandonment are like, you know
Best
what I mean? It would be
friends, right.
some form of like weirdo, misfit,
Yeah.
like be more, like, why do you keep saying stuff without thinking about it first? Or like, why do you have to be so bossy to everybody? Or like whatever I'm going to come up with. Right.
Yep.
So it's also important when you're doing this to then go, okay, when that comes up, what's the step right before that?
Yeah.
Because what's loneliness? It's an unmet need.
Right.
Is what loneliness is.
Right.
But what's the thing before that? And it's like, to me, I would say like solitary. Like there's something probably that you liked about being alone.
Yes.
And there was a trip where it became lonely, and there's a line, and your inner child is like, we feel lonely. And so like anytime you're trying to find peace alone, your inner child's going to make you feel lonely. But she also at some point probably liked being alone.
Yeah, like I think there's definitely a part of me that like loved like the sort of contemplative nature of being alone.
Yes.
Like the like solitude,
in your head,
thinking,
you get to
like
be,
like thinking a lot, feeling a lot, analyzing a lot, like observing people, but also being silly and having fun.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think that did in my childhood trip way over the line into loneliness.
And then you can the beauty of that, like in a sad thing to say there's beauty isn't always nice, but you know what I mean?
Well, that's the Lydia Dietz.
Yeah. Okay. So the beauty and the loneliness of Lydia Dietz is that you know when you are feeling lonely as an adult, because you can feel lonely with people.
100%. Oftentimes more so.
Yes.
That's when I would feel most lonely, is when I'm with the wrong people.
Okay, exactly right. When you start to feel lonely, it's it's not a responsibility, but it's a beautiful opportunity to sit with your inner child.
Correct.
That's a great time to do inner child work. And it can be after, like you might just want to sit in it and not like psychoanalyze, which is not you and I. We always psychoanalyze.
Yep.
Where we intellectualize things maybe a little too much if we're honest.
True.
But that's like, loneliness. I connect that with my inner child. So let me talk to her. Let me bring her in. Let me have her be present. Let's work on this together. Like she's at a seat at the table. Let me talk to her. That's going to help you move through it, or create a plan to not sit in it, or even to get the support you need to not feel that way.
I mean, just bringing my inner child to the table soothes some of that loneliness.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly, like just being included.
Exactly right. Okay. So now I'm going to ask a question which you've already sort of brought up, which is perfect. Which is like, what do they dislike, advocate against, and feel stifled by? Yeah. So I don't think I would put loneliness in that category. That's just a feeling that your inner child like tells you like they felt, and is probably there's some unhealed things in it still. But when you think like, what does my inner child not like? A lot of times this is easier for people than what they do like.
Correct.
Because I mean, I was kind of a petulant child, and I think you were too. Like, kids who feel a lot, we know a lot of the things we don't like. But like really, really think about that and like what feels prevalent to you now. So for me, I think you're going to like this. My inner child, my IC, little Heather, despised being defined or categorized.
That makes a lot of sense.
More on that in a minute.
That makes a lot of sense.
And doing anything that doesn't require imagination, she was not interested in. She didn't want to do it. She felt like I can feel a temper tantrum. And I wasn't a temper tantrum kid, so I must have stifled or exhibited it in a different way. Yeah. I'll talk to my mom about it later. But I think she would just say, you were really moody while you did that. If I knew I couldn't go to that world, I didn't. My inner child was like, why would we do that? We're not interested. Like, too boxed in.
Yep.
And the defined or categorized, I think, came from people always doing that to me and me struggling to really understand what was going on. And, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But when other people are categorizing you and saying like, oh, you're well-behaved, or you're sweet, or you're nice, or you're whatever pretty word. Yeah. To me, still to this day, but this is my inner child, it was an immediate like, why is that what you see? Why are you just labeling me with little words? Right. Now, as an adult, I've rewritten this story, and we're going to talk about it, so I don't want to do the whole thing, but like, it's important to know where that comes from, because literally when somebody labels me now, I feel this giant rebellion to prove that I'm not that.
Right.
Even which makes no sense. Yeah. Oh, you're so nice. You can ask my husband. I literally say like, I'm not that nice. That's what I say when people say that. And I'm bad at accepting compliments for other reasons too. But my husband will say like that I look nice. I immediately make the stupidest face, ugliest face I can. Like, I'm like, like immediately to show that I'm not like, it's
so you don't look nice.
Yes. Right. It's like, it's so in my being to rebel against a label, even if it's kind.
Yeah.
But like, that is my inner child getting sick of everyone's shit.
Gotcha.
Is what's going on. Okay. I need to hear what yours doesn't like.
My inner child doesn't like people watching me.
Ooh, being observed.
Yeah. Doesn't like too many rules. Like, I like a framework, but I don't like a ton of rules.
Too much structure.
And I don't like criticism. Ooh. Like even like a critique she would take as a criticism. Like, any commentary really would be like a criticism.
Interesting. I feel like they're so similar. They're just like little.
Yes.
It's like other people reacting to us we did not enjoy.
No, exactly.
I think
right. Yeah, like, let me live. Exactly.
As we're on a video podcast, having people react to us for a job. Right. Yeah. But I think that's really interesting. And how do you feel like that still affects you now?
I mean, I still feel those same ways. I manage them. I've like masked them with like extreme people pleasing. So I basically took all of it and turned it. Like, I made myself the boss of it. Like, people are going to perceive me. They're going to criticize me.
Yeah.
So I might as well become like the master and commander of it and like manage how everybody sees me.
Be like, I'll control how you see
control
me.
it.
I'm not the only control
Right.
girl on this
No,
podcast.
absolutely not.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right.
And I'm sure, even though I know I would call you a people pleaser in recovery, as I would refer to myself now, 100%. I don't think we're still that. It's not something that you just stop doing. No. I think if you're a super empathic person, you're going to have people pleasing elements to you. Right. It's just natural, but you do it from a place of a different kind of awareness, I think. Right. So yeah. Interesting, Jamie.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, what is your inner child afraid of? Mine, this is interesting because you have to weed through stuff. Because you're going to come up with like weird little things. Like I remember being like, spiders was the first thing that came up. And I was like, that's not what I'm looking for. I am still afraid of spiders. But when I really looked and thought like, what is she like big afraid of? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mine was and still is afraid of someone being unwell and I can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. Like I just have to accept that as a reality and exist with someone being unwell. Like everyone's going to ask me to just act normal, but like someone I care about isn't well.
Right.
That is what she's afraid of.
That's valid.
I mean, you're looking at me like that because I still play that out constantly.
But that's even like that's valid for anybody.
It
also.
It is.
Like, you know, right. I mean, like sometimes like I feel like we're really harsh on ourselves, or maybe it's just me. But like,
it's definitely not just you. I think that's the most common thing my therapist says to me is, I think you're being a little really too hard on yourself. Exactly. I also think it's the most common thing you say to me.
It's true.
It is true.
But like that's something that anyone would deal with. Like you like I think when you do this work, sometimes you can be hard on yourself. Like, oh, I was so fixated on this or caught up on that, or I had to have control over this. But like being scared of someone not being well is like, oh, that's valid.
It is valid. I think what you then do with it is to go like, well, what stories have I created?
Correct.
Because little kid me didn't have enough brain developed to deal with
literally.
Yes, literally. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Like the age that you're at, you don't have all the tools for this. So you created some stories to get through it.
Right.
And so what are those stories and how are they hurting me now? And a lot of those stories have to do with like being perceived. Again, the things my inner child didn't like.
Right.
Like, oh my God, people are going to label me or they're going to think I'm this and I'm not that and no one can see me. Right. Like, and that sort of struggle and the need to mask all the time and like that stuff, that's when you go, oh, that comes from that. That's because my inner child's afraid of that. And it's sort of like, we don't need to fear that anymore. It's still valid.
Right.
But it's all those coping mechanisms we have of controlling everything and like, trying to like, charge down the door and, make sure everyone's good all the time.
Right.
Like that's not something that's keeping us safe.
Exactly.
It's probably hurting us more.
It definitely is.
Yeah. All right. How about you? What's your inner child afraid of? What is little J / Lydia Dietz fear?
So, well, that's the truth about the teenager, like putting those into play.
Yep.
Is like, that's that like I'm just got off course, but like
it's okay.
That's that Lydia Dietz. It's like I'm alone. I'm utterly alone. Is that like you take the thing you're most afraid of as a child and you make it your personality?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm terrified of being alone, and then you're Lydia, who's like I'm so alone, and that's
and think about that because little kid you couldn't create a story where that wasn't true, and she didn't have the tools to not be alone.
Right.
Okay.
So I just made it cool.
So you decided to be like, it's actually, I'm going to have the power over this. Exactly. And I'm going to decide I'm alone. And that's who I am.
Exactly.
And that's actually really emotionally intelligent of your little kid self.
Right.
That's like it grabs the power.
Brain.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
But now it's going to hurt you
Correct.
if it stops you from connecting with people sometimes.
Right.
So like that's the beauty of it. It's like it's not wrong, it's not right, it's not invalid, it's not stupid.
Right.
It's just at the seat at the table, that's the voice and that's why. And you can go, oh, that's why I'm feeling like this.
Yeah.
Let me address this differently.
Right.
Yeah.
But little Jay, what was she afraid of? So the first thing when I think of that is I see like duct tape on my mouth, which didn't happen in real life. That didn't happen.
Right.
But like that, like being silenced, like, or like having to be quiet.
Yeah.
Like that, like I hated that.
Yeah.
And I think I had to be that a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't like, what else didn't I like? Was it what I'm afraid of? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Afraid of being alone.
Yeah.
But like being like the ultimate alone, like being abandoned, like being left behind,
Mm-hmm.
being left alone,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which your life didn't decide to support not happening. It was like, let's actually test
Data.
you a
It was
lot
like,
on
oh,
that.
you want data on that? We'll give it to you.
We'll really throw a lot of that at you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then also thinking like, where does that live now?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like which we're kind of talking about, which we said, like for me, it comes out as control.
Mm-hmm.
It also comes out in overanalyzing, and then the ruminating we talk about afterwards. Like those are all symptoms of that. Like I need to show up as this perfect version of myself all the time,
Yep.
right, in order to be safe, and that's impossible. And there is no perfect version. And if I somehow nail it, in this quote unquote perfect version of myself, I'm going to leave feeling shitty because that's not authentic.
Right.
I'm not her.
Right.
You know, like I'm just whoever showed up at that moment,
Exactly.
which again, you can hear my inner child being like, don't define me.
I am who I was then, not who I am now.
Yeah. I might show up to the exact same event 3 days later and be a different person at it, but that's just normal.
Right.
Right. So like that's where it shows up now. It shows up with like really like worrying about things that are outside of my control. And so, but I know that.
Yeah.
And so if the inner child's at the table, I'm like, oh, let's talk about this together. I mean, I think it shows up similar for you. Yeah. But how would you say?
I think for me, it's like that, definitely ruminating, a ton of ruminating.
Yeah.
People pleasing, which I've gotten better at, but I definitely still lean that way. And then I think self-isolating. So like, it's like a preemptive. It's like I'll self-isolate to manage the loneliness.
Which again, is so interesting to me. Sorry to get excited about your pain. Luckily, you know me well enough to understand it. I don't know how to explain it to you. But it's so interesting because, I mean, knowing you, I know that like it's actually really good for your system to isolate.
Exactly.
It really is. That is how you really recharge your battery.
Yes.
So isn't it interesting then that the trauma and like the bad stories come from doing the same thing? So like that's why it's so important to think about how you feel all the time, because there's a line that you cross into loneliness, and there's on one hair on the other side of it is happiness. Right. Is like what you need. Right. And you're teetering on it sometimes.
And to talk about like the sort of like the emotional intelligence of your inner child. Like, I knew that. Yep. Like I somehow intuitively knew that it was like, it was helpful for me to recharge and to be alone for X amount of time. Yep. You know, so I was doing that. But then like you said, you cross the line, you go a step too far, and then it becomes like self-harm or punishment or whatever it is. Like then it's not healthy anymore.
Yes. It's so important to look at that, because we tend to make stuff so categorized into right and wrong or healthy or unhealthy. And it's like, it's not like that. Right. It's literally like a hair, like a shade. And it's just an emotional shift into another place. Exactly. And it's just about being aware of it. It's not about punishing yourself, but like if you were
fixing or like
self-isolating and all of a sudden you started to feel lonely, if you decided to like beat yourself up or be like, what are you talking about? This is how we reach out. That wouldn't do you any good. But if you then stopped and were like, ooh.
Oh, I think I took this a little bit too far.
Yeah. What happened? What's going on? What was I just thinking about? What led to this? Like what's going on? Maybe something happened 3 years ago and it just popped into your head. Like what it was that? Because your system just took an opportunity to try to heal something in a safe space. Exactly. But the lines are so, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I'm going to like mini tangent it, because we're already like in a long episode here. I still have more to talk about. But this is why I feel like it's so hard to have like real conversations about like healthy body image.
Oh, okay.
Because they're all like a hair over the line of what's healthy and what's not healthy for you. And it's all different for every single person. And like when I think about my inner child, one of the things that she thrived with and needed, and now that I understand that she was in a constant state of overstimulation, I understand her better, but I didn't know this until somewhat recently. Right. Is that like being physical, like moving my body, like going for a walk, going for a run, playing a sport, dancing, like doing these things really fed my inner child, because she always needed to be stimulated, but she also needed to know where the line was of overstimulation and learn how to deal with it. And doing those kinds of things did that.
That's a great point.
Okay. So, but the problem is that later on, playing those truths out, there's a version of myself who would take exercising and moving her body to a very unhealthy, punish yourself place.
Correct.
And there isn't like a dotted line somewhere that I can draw to say like that's where it's healthy and that's where it's not healthy. It's just suddenly I'm doing something like the self-isolating, and I suddenly realize I'm in the bad place. I'm now like shaming myself or doing it to.
Well, you're harming yourself. You're harming your body. It's not helping your body anymore. It's now harming your body.
Yes, but it's not clear. Like it's not easy. Like, oh, I'm gonna go for a walk or I'm gonna go for a run, and like. Great. And then sometimes it's a smaller thing and I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
Yep.
Like I'm doing this because I'm upset about my body, like not for what my inner child is looking for.
Right.
And so that's why this work is about being conscious and present all the time.
Yep.
Because you can't draw a line. You don't know when it's going to come up. You don't know when the wire trips and you're on the other side.
And most of these behaviors, unless they're explicitly dangerous behaviors, you can't unequivocally say this is always good or always bad.
Exactly.
Right.
It just was then. For some reason, it was bad then.
Right.
For some reason, it was good then.
Right.
And trying to take the shame and judgment out of it, which is nearly impossible, or at least trying to not sit in it, is very, very difficult, but very, very helpful because it's just your experience.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's tough. Okay. You need to ask your inner child what they need every day.
True.
When I say you need to, I'm not trying to like shame you into doing it or make you do a 10-step program. Or for my people like Jamie who too much structure wouldn't work. Like that would make them feel squidgy.
Right.
I'm just saying like every day if you could, it would be really nice to just like give a little shout like, hey, what are you looking for today? You don't have to do it. You just have to know.
Right.
You know, find a way maybe you can. They're not going to say like, I mean, sometimes they're going to say like an ice cream or something. Great.
Right.
Do it or don't.
Cool. Right.
But most of the time it's going to be a feeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Learn to know what it feels like when your inner child's triggered.
Yes.
Because it's a very specific, it's a different feeling than just like your current triggered self. What does it feel like in your body? I would describe mine as frustration and unease, which don't sound necessarily like very childlike, but as a kid, I would feel upset. Like I was like you, like super emotional, right? Notice a pattern with intuitive people. And so like, but I was always trying to control other people's perception of me. So I wouldn't act it out. I would try in sort of a people pleasing thing. I would try to like, no matter how I was feeling, I would try to like shove that down and like act in a situation the way I thought was best for everybody there. And it causes this inner frustration. And I know exactly what it feels like in my body. So it's like a frustration of like my authentic reaction and the reaction I'm allowed to have. And I'm not necessarily trying to edit it. It's just what happens.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
That frustration and then just a feeling of unease is the best way I can describe it. It's just like a little bit on edge, like about to, it's like something's about to jump out at me feeling of like, like I can't relax, on alert. Yes. That is a triggered inner child for me because my adult self, I wouldn't pick those words or descriptions for like not inner child being triggered.
Right. Gotcha.
How would yours feel?
So for me, it's like I currently feel it when it happens. It feels like I'm having a temper tantrum like inside, like an internal, like I can almost see my legs kicking. Like I'm like literally having like a temper tantrum, which I did have as a child. Like I was like super like that sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's
as a child.
That's not unhealthy.
I know.
Yeah,
I was a kid.
Yeah. That's allowed.
It's okay, Jamie.
It's okay, little Jay.
It's okay, Jay. You're fine.
Yeah.
But like, no, it feels like I think there was like a frustration.
Yeah.
Like you said, I would feel highly frustrated, but like I was stuck in my body. Like I wanted to like push out of myself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The stuck in your body thing is like, I'm thinking of other times when you've said that and had tough reactions to it. Yeah. Okay.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Yes. But I feel that now. That's how I know that my inner child or inner teenager is at play.
Yeah.
My teenager would be like a little more like sullen and moody about it. But like my inner child would be like I would be really reactive and like temperamental and mad.
Yes.
That's how I know that like I'm having like a really big reaction to something.
Yes. So I think another important thing to do for your inner child is to ask, like, how is it safe to let that out? Because most likely, like you're saying, and like I was saying, you are swallowing
Correct.
some part of it.
Right.
At some
And
point,
you
you
still
stopped
probably
having
are.
a
Right.
temper tantrum, and like
Yes.
your teenage self wouldn't let you. So, like,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yep.
Or you felt shame or whatever. So, like, how do you now let that out? Like, what does that look like? It doesn't have to look childlike at all.
Right.
It could, it can look like a lot of different things. And so, like, asking yourself that and finding it, because if you're continuing to squelch it, you're continuing to stifle your inner child.
Correct.
So
Agreed.
okay. I want to
We'll be right back after this short break. You know what goes great with podcast listening?
A great cup of coffee from a great coffee shop.
Yep, beans roasted in-house, amazing baristas. You know where I'm talking about.
Restoration Coffee. Can we go?
Yes, I need an Americano and maybe a panini too.
Ooh, I need blueberry maple latte and probably a resto bowl.
Ooh, yeah, check them out and visit restoration-coffee.com.
I want to just touch on how creativity and your inner child are so deeply connected. You cannot separate them.
You have a whole half a page left.
This may be 2 episodes, Jamie. I don't know. We'll try to squeeze it in. Okay.
Don't rush it.
Okay. If you want to tap into your own creativity and understand it, you are tapping directly into your inner child.
Definitely.
That's what it is.
Right.
It's one of the things I love. I don't really have this in this way, so like I'm a little bit envious of the way that it plays out, but like it's like beautifully exampled, where like people who have their creativity comes out in a form of like real art.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like I'm talking like painting or sculptures or like things like, yes, they're an artist of some kind. In it, when you see them doing the thing, you catch glimpses of their inner child. Like you see it. Like I am drawn to it. I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, there it is.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of like being performed, and it's really beautiful.
Yep.
So it doesn't always look like you're being a little kid, but like you feel someone's inner child present when they're really tapped into their creativity, however they do that.
Yep.
So I think that's really great. And I think it's good to know, like, in however you express creativity, your inner child, like bringing them with you is helpful.
Yep.
So I think for me, creativity a lot of times comes out in writing. And so in storytelling of some kind, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm doing that, I try not to be rigid. Like I don't ever sit at a desk. Mm. You know what I mean? Yep. I like, how would my inner child be sitting? Like she would have a snack for sure. So there was a snack. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't create too much structure because that my inner child doesn't feel present when I do that. Right. So it's like finding ways to bring that in.
Love that.
Okay. I would just like to say that when the energy of someone's inner child like pops up, which happens all the time when you're communicating with someone, it's one of my favorite like things to feel. It's usually very carefree. So when you see someone, I feel like adults just get like moments of carefree. They don't necessarily get to be super carefree in this hellscape of a world that we live in.
Right.
But if you're wondering what the energy feels like, I think this is a good example. You can let me know, Jay. But like if you're with someone and they start to laugh uncontrollably and they really just let go and like laugh really hard.
Yes.
Like, and aren't in control of it. Maybe they're crying. Maybe they're like peeing their pants, like whatever. Like they're making funny noises.
Yep.
That's what someone's inner child feels like. It's very present there. And it's really beautiful.
Yep. I agree.
I love that. So next time you see someone laughing like that, and also that's why it feels so good to laugh like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like I see that in myself, but like, or maybe it's different, but I can see, sorry, I'm thinking about it.
No, I'm good. I like it. Yeah.
So like at my new job where I work now, I work at a school.
Yeah.
An elementary school. And there are often times at different events where I will see the kids doing something that myself as a child would have loved. Mm-hmm. I'm like verklempt right now.
I love it.
And like, it's the most joyous thing.
Yeah, I know.
But I literally like get verklempt and start to tear up.
Yeah,
because I'm like,
I like that you're just mentioning it, and we're both like,
But it's like that heals.
That's healing.
That's healing.
That's why
for
it feels
me,
so
right. And that's why I
emotional.
love being there, and like why I'm so drawn to that particular community is because I feel like that's where my self as a child would have loved to have been.
Yeah.
She would have been safe there. And so when I get to see other kids be safe,
Yes, it heals.
it heals me
It does.
to see that and to witness that. Usually I'm photographing it, or I'm like I'm just on the sidelines of it, but I'm like, it's beautiful because you're healing yourself when you're doing things like that.
That's why people will say stuff like, oh, this thing that I do for other people, yes, it helps them, but I think it gives me more.
Right.
That's where that comes from.
Right.
Is you're literally taking these like pieces of your inner child that's like, we don't have this, and going like, I'm showing it
Here,
to you. Here it
right,
is. You've
right.
got
You
it
can have
now.
this, right.
You know, we actually orchestrate it for other people, and
Correct.
what that does, because again, you have to remember the trippy thing I said about time,
Exactly.
is that it actually does heal your childhood self back there,
Exactly.
which now heals you here.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's trippy and awesome, and you should be verklempt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try all different kinds of tools with this. It's going to depend on your clairs, which one, your top clairs. Again, we have episodes on that.
Mm-hmm.
What you're the most drawn to. Personally, it's like visualization for me, which
Same.
is not shocking because we're both very clairvoyant.
Yeah.
But for some people, it will be writing. For some people, it will be like a literal meditation. Again, meditation doesn't have to be sitting quietly. You can meditate on a walk. There's all different ways. Find the way that works for you. But just try a bunch of different things. And the same thing isn't going to always work for the same thing you're dealing with. So if you're like, gosh, my visualizations aren't working. That's okay. Your inner child requires a different tool. Just try that.
There are also therapists that will do that with you. Like my therapist does guided visualizations with me. And it's awesome.
And if you don't have access to a therapist, there are free guided ones for inner child. There's a lot of them. Just, I mean, make sure it's a decent one. Maybe read the comments first. But yeah. Okay. Don't do any Teal Swan ones. See our episode on Teal Swan. She has one about inner child work. Don't
do that one.
No. Okay. When we're talking about doing the work here, it's very important. You referenced this before, to go and identify and label the things like we're talking about. But it's also important to take the next step, which is to do what I call like reconciling the beliefs.
Yes.
Okay. And I say reconcile because they're not wrong. They just need to be reconciled.
That's the most important part.
Yeah. Okay. And a lot of people don't do this part.
Because it's work.
Yeah. And it's work. And not to be a broken record, but it's not a 10-step program kind of work.
Correct.
You can have tools to use and you can have programs to like incorporate, but like this part is something that you have to sort of live out, and you're very much on that spiral staircase that we talk about, where you're going to address it from a different angle later, and you're not just like, oh, done with that forever. Like it's
exactly.
It's part of your lessons. Like it's going to keep coming back. So my example, and I sort of referenced this before, is like my inner child really hates to be defined and labeled and has a lot of trouble with it, even to the point where I read into, I mean, shocker, I'm like analyzing everyone's human behavior all the time, but like I read into something someone says as a label when it's probably just a comment.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And don't forget that everything everyone says is actually about themselves.
Oh my God, that's what I'm about to say. Yes, exactly. Okay. So my inner child fully believes that in order to be accepted in light, that she has to fit into a category that isn't authentic to who she is. So she's perceiving people calling her things like quiet, or which seems weird because I'm also loud, and like, or loud, which seems weird because I'm also called quiet. Like just constantly being told, a thing we do to kids all the time, especially we do to little girls. I won't go on that tangent, but we do.
It's true.
Okay. And my little kid self, call it whatever you want, interest in human behavior since I was a baby, autism, all of these things, right? Yeah, I was like analyzing people when I was born. Like, okay.
You're like the boss baby of human behavior.
I was, yeah. But like all of these things are playing a part, but I'm perceiving that to be true when it's not necessarily what people are meaning to do.
Correct.
Because what your inner child doesn't know that your adult self knows is that everything is not always about you. But kids don't know that. So like it's not selfish. It's just your perspective of a child is that.
Exactly.
Okay. What my adult self knows to be true.
Right.
Like again, if you're connecting the dots now that I felt this way and then went on to try to be a mastermind in human behavior. Right. I know I connected those dots too. I get it. Okay. Don't write in, or you can, but I already know. I see it. Okay. My adult self understands that what people are doing when they are labeling you something is projecting commonality onto you because they want to connect with other people. They want to have things in common. So if,
correct,
as a little kid, when that person was saying, oh, you're quiet, it was because they feel like they're quiet. Yes. Or, oh, you're nice because they feel like they're nice. They had nothing to do with them deciding who I was and not seeing it.
Right.
It had to do with them trying to find a thing in common and projecting that onto me. Adult me knows that. But inner child me does not know that.
And that's why it's helpful to bring your inner child to the table so you can, and again, this sounds like a lot, but it's the truth. If you literally just explain that,
yes,
to your inner child,
yes,
like, oh, we actually weren't too quiet or we weren't too loud. It was that person, like I can think of so many times in my childhood where people said things to me or like put expectations on me for certain things, and they literally thought they were helping me.
Yes, because to them, that was what they needed or what they felt like.
Or they felt like the situation called for or what they would do in a situation. And so as a child, I felt all of these like requirements and like all of these pressures to behave in a certain way and to do things in a certain way or to be perceived a certain way. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that person was just looking out for me.
Yeah.
That person wasn't trying to like make me feel X, Y, and Z.
No.
And if I just, when I took the time to explain that to myself, it made all the difference in the world because it reframed the perspective that 6-year-old who I'm still carrying around with me, who still lives with me inside of me, when she understood that, it then changed the way she saw it.
Exactly. Because 6-year-old you was feeling like her self-worth, again, a made-up concept, but
there's an episode on that also.
Exactly. was lowering because of it.
Correct.
Because she was saying there's something wrong with me.
Right.
And so that becomes the story.
Correct.
Because she does not know this information.
Right.
Your little kid self. And even you're going to have to keep explaining it to her because she's not capable of really understanding it.
Right.
So it's like why it's a seat at the table where like she's saying that and you're going, oh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. That's not what's happening.
Right.
This is what's happening.
Right.
And she's going, okay, but you're going to have to explain it to her again next time.
And then you're modeling for her like you do your own actual children if you have them.
Yes,
you're modeling for her what to do.
Exactly. And walking through it and unpacking it. And then she heals a little bit more. And it keeps getting easier, but it keeps happening because you're still dealing with a 6-year-old or whatever age you've picked. You know what I'm saying? So it's important to know that. And then it's important to, like, I explain to mine all the time because my inner child always thinks she's too much, right? Like she's not hitting the mark. She's too much. Like she's got a mask for everything. If her full self was to, be given to someone, they would not be able to handle. They would be hurt by it. She would scare them. Like there's all these stories. Okay.
Right.
I'm constantly saying like, if people dislike me, it's because like they'll have this story where in their head they think like I'm better than them if I'm being too shiny, and that makes them feel bad. So then they mistreat me and dislike me, but it has actually nothing to do with who I am as a person.
Right.
If they think I'm not good enough for them, it's because of a feeling that they have about themselves that I've triggered. It doesn't mean I have no responsibility in my behavior.
Right.
Of course I do. But it actually doesn't have anything to do with my quality of self.
Exactly.
Because you can't even, you don't know who I am.
Right.
So that's what I'm always telling my inner child. And I think everyone has a version of that they need to be telling their inner child because that's how your inner child feels.
Right.
Yeah. I could talk about that for 4 more hours, but I'll move on.
Yeah.
What parts of your inner child did you learn to edit?
Oh.
So, and this is, think of like people's reaction to you. So you're not editing it when you're alone. When you're
Right.
with other people, what did your inner child learn to edit? She didn't at first, but at some point she started editing these things. So for me, it's curiosity, loudness, being the center of attention, and anything intuitive that I picked up and anyone noticing it or figuring out that I did it. Those were my biggest editing things.
Yep.
Okay, how about yours?
Mine, I think a lot of mine were actually like physical, like how I physically like held my body and like I think, you know, as an ADHD kid, I wanted to like be sprawled out and laying, and I felt like I had to be proper and polite and sit up and be respectful. And
so it was like your body language that you felt mostly was reflecting.
It wasn't
the
translating.
Wrong thing.
Yeah,
Wasn't
it wasn't
translating.
translating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and then I also had to hide, like, again, like I didn't know it was intuition then, but it was like me perceiving people's emotions, me like being really aware of what people were feeling and not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Definitely. So then it's going like, how do I let those things be free now? And it's okay for them to be free alone. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to celebrate, like, for example, my curiosity. As you know, I'm a deeply, deeply curious person. It's how my brain likes to travel really far down roads. Okay.
Yep.
And so when mine just keeps being curious and asking questions, that's just how it's constantly operating. So for me, I would try to mask that. I still am like very careful about how, because that looks weird. But like, as you know, one of my favorite things to do is to use my little airplane app that your husband also likes to use.
Now, thanks
where, because an airplane goes by, I'm sitting outside doing something, an airplane goes by, and my brain and my inner child go, I wonder where that airplane's going. And so then I use my app and it tells me, and then like I make up a story. I'm like, ooh, these people are probably on vacation. And that makes my inner child happy because she loves to use her imagination and she's super curious about everything. That, right. I tell you I do it. I announce to my poor husband every airplane going by and where it's going to and from. But that's not, like, I'm not doing that in front of other people.
No, right.
But like it's giving her the space that she was like squelched with a little bit, you know? So like finding little things like that. Like you don't have to go like pretend to be super curious in front of everybody. Right. Like just give it space somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's important to know what you edited. Okay.
Yeah.
When you think about being those things, like which one is the hardest to be in front of people is very good information. It doesn't mean you have to do anything with it. To me, it's center of attention, unfortunately. I have to really control that. But like, which one is the hardest to be in front of people, and like think about why.
Interesting.
What do you think for you? I mean, I can't really picture you like sprawling out in front of people, but I'm trying to think more of like you just being fidgety and ADHD.
Yeah. And I was also thinking when you were talking about how I used to manage, like, I think I was actually a pretty likable kid, and I think other kids didn't like that.
The shininess thing.
Yeah. So like, I think like teachers liked me and other adults liked me. And I think that I pulled back a lot on that. That's where like the Leah Dietz came out too. Also, she could sort of like retract.
Yeah.
So like now I try to allow myself to be likable and like to have attention from people for being like good. You know what I mean? Where before I would have not done that. I wouldn't have let that light shine on me.
For sure. I think you've done a lot of work there too. Yeah. Interesting. I have a comment to make about that off when we're not recording.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So a tip for engaging your inner child is how would you connect to a child right now? That's sort of how you need to engage with your inner child. Meaning, if you were in the presence of a 6-year-old that you didn't know, you wouldn't sit there and like intellectualize everything.
Yeah, but you know what I would do?
What would you do?
Is that I would actually just talk to a kid like with respect, and like I respected their intelligence. That's what people didn't do for me.
Okay, you know perfect. I mean? Exactly.
Like I'm like, hey, what's up? How are you? I'm not like, how are you?
Exactly.
I don't like talk down to them. I don't condescend.
Exactly. Like, how would you engage with a kid? Okay.
Yes.
So not only is it like you wouldn't sit and intellectualize everything.
Right.
Right. But you're going to engage with a kid the way that you liked to be engaged with as a kid. Because I don't care if you're trying to like escape that. You can't. Your human mind, it's not possible. You can't separate that.
Right.
So you're going to do that.
Yep.
So that's going to give you this great information. But I think a lot of people do this a little too rigid too, because like if there was a little kid right there, I wouldn't like sit here and wait for it to come to me. I would like engage physically. Like I would go down on the ground.
Yeah.
I would go to their level. I would
Right.
talk to them. I would ask them questions about themselves. I mean, I know to like ask them questions about things they like, and
Right.
all of a sudden they get on a topic and then they switch, and you would just like let them go, and you would
Right.
sort of follow their lead.
Which is what you wanted people to do for you.
Yes, but also what your inner child still wants.
Yes. Yes.
It's a beautiful setup, because
Sure
then you're
is.
going to do the exact thing
Right.
your inner child wanted you to do.
Right.
Mine was just like people asking me questions to like get to know me and like not care what the category was.
Right. Or what the answer was.
Yeah.
Right.
I think yours was just people like observing you without judgment, which is very similar.
Yeah. Or without like pity.
Yeah.
Or empathy or something. Like I wanted people
Pity.
just to like,
Yeah.
just to talk to me.
I think you ended up feeling, listen to me, Tank. This is how I think you feel. I think you ended up feeling labeled as
Yes.
like the girl without a mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then not seen for who you were.
Correct. That's what people all no, that you're right.
Yeah.
People always just dealt with me through the lens of that, not
Yeah.
like
Who
who's
you
Jamie
are. Yeah.
and like what's she up to.
Yeah.
It's like how's Jamie and is she like a destroyed shell
Yeah.
of a human?
So wild that people would do that to a child. I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay. Your universal desires and fears are so important in this work.
Yes.
Again,
As we've mentioned.
we have episodes on that, and I feel like I say this in every episode, but to understand your human behavior and that of others, you need to know these things.
Yes.
But I just want to quickly say that when you're doing inner child work, you want to use like work in reverse.
Okay.
So you would be like rejection is mine. How was I being rejected as a kid? Not like necessarily like how am I painting the picture of rejection, or how am I thinking or fearing rejection? How was I rejected?
Correct.
Okay. And then when you're looking at the desires, like what was making me feel certain? What was making me feel love and connection? That's how you go from the angle. You can certainly go the other way,
Right.
but you're going to get much more value because this is you developing and like setting those into
those are getting
into
like
place.
cemented into you.
Exactly right. Okay. I sort of said this before, but I just want to say it here at the end again, that like a lot of people say your inner child work is like healing parts of you that were neglected as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And where that is true,
Mm-hmm.
if you just look at like it as neglect, you're going to miss so much because it's so much more
Right.
than that. Anytime you felt fear or struggled with big worldly concepts, like at some point in your life, you figured out that everybody dies and you can't do shit about it. And you were a little kid.
Yeah. Or I mean, if you're a human living on this planet, you've lived through some major catastrophe, whether it's a global pandemic or a terror attack or some sort of epidemic.
Yeah.
You've lived through that. So like
Yeah.
you've processed that like shit is scary.
The
Like
setup
in
here is
your body, in your
crazy.
house, but also
Yes.
the world.
Yeah. And you also, at some point, because this is true for every human and studied in psychology, it's not just me psychoanalyzing, other people are, right?
Right.
That like at some point you figured out that you're all alone in your body and you have to be all by yourself in here.
Right.
And that doesn't feel natural.
Correct.
Why? That's a great question, maybe for another episode. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, these are devastatingly difficult things that you
Yes.
have to come to terms with when you don't have the tools to come to terms with them. And it's
Yep.
weird. And we don't do a great job as a society of talking about these things or honoring them. And we also grew up in a system that, like, in our opinion, I'll speak for both of us, doesn't represent death for what it is.
No.
So
No.
I'm just saying, like, if you just are looking at neglect, you're missing it.
Right.
There's a lot of truths you had to come to terms with that in themselves are their own thing to unpack.
Right. Or start there. Start with the neglect or the traumas or
Yeah.
the big life events that
Yeah.
happen to you. Start there. But
Yeah.
then you're going to start to see that it's the more mundane, everyday things that have also impacted you.
It could have been a TV show you were watching. It doesn't, it's all there, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, the word playful and how you relate, how your adult self connects to the word playful is very, very valuable information because that is going to talk to you about your own relationship with your inner child. If I said, describe how you feel about the word playful.
Yep.
And then I said, describe how you feel about your inner child. You're describing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
I'm making a face about it.
I think a lot of people have a hard time like being playful. Like they've been socialized to be very rigid.
Because adults aren't. I think we're not supposed to be playful,
or
we're only supposed to be playful in certain ways.
Yeah, we're supposed to go get in the rat race and work and go home and die.
Exactly.
There's no time for fun or playfulness or being connected to desire.
Yes.
Or your intuition or whatever, you know.
Yeah. So really, really look at that. I think for me, one of the most beautiful things about being in my 40s, I think you would attest to this too, is like there's a little bit more like of an allowance for playful, like naturally.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this feels better now. But I also think it has to do with like the age of your children and like the other responsibilities and where you are, you know, there's privilege to being able to be playful, of course, 100%. Right? Yep. But I think understanding that, like we talk about, like your relationship to the word desire is also your relationship to intuition. Yes. Your relationship to the word playful is also your relationship to your inner child. So if I say like, how do you feel being playful or letting people see your playful side? And it's like, oh God, I would never, I can't, it's terrible or fearful. Then you're very disconnected from your inner child.
Yeah. I mean, my answer would be that I would only be playful in front of certain people.
Same.
So like that would tell me how safe my inner child feels.
I feel like I do a thing where it's like I send out this feeler when I'm with people of like, how safe will my playful side be, right? You know what I mean?
How much of my weird can you handle?
Yeah, probably not a lot.
Because I feel like those are connected. Playful and weird to me are
and I think similar. when you do a job like we do, where your field of study is considered weird, it feels like a strange collision. For me anyways, when people like put together like, oh, you're Heather from the Intuitive Girls Guide. That's you. Yes. But they're also in another element of my life that they haven't seen much weird.
They're trying to reconcile those two people.
Yeah, but they're fine. They don't have a problem with it. I feel uncomfortable because all of a sudden I'm like, ooh.
Oh, you saw that side of me.
I didn't get to control the weird coming in. You went and listened to a bunch of episodes.
Without my permission.
We didn't talk about it first. Yeah.
Right.
Like that.
Yes.
If you have a similar thing and maybe you're not in necessarily a job that would be considered weird, but like where the different sides of you come into play, like just pay attention to that because that's also that work, that inner child work. Like what was both of our inner childs were very concerned with how people were perceiving us.
Yes.
And very injured by the way that they were.
Yes.
So, and for very different reasons. So like that's playing out for us all the time. Right. So imagine if we didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I lived that way for a while.
I mean, me too. I mean, still, like I remember what brutal. That felt like, and it really feels like I didn't like myself.
And like you're constantly on guard and you're constantly masking.
And you're just constantly feeling shitty about yourself. Even if that's not front of brain, if you're constantly adjusting that and monitoring it.
Yes. It's a lot of work.
It is. And that's a lot of shame to hold in your body, baby.
Sure is.
All right. This has been 100 hours of inner child work for you. But I think my inner child was a blabbermouth.
Oh, I was going to say healed a little bit.
Yeah, but she talks a lot.
So let her.
I know, I am. Yeah. And it's an hour and 40 minutes. My inner child just blabbed and your inner child blabbed. But you know what? They've been heard.
We loved it.
Yeah, we did. So hopefully you liked it.
Let us know.
I hope your inner child feels safe and welcome. And I hope you can create some fun words for yours.
Yeah, give her a seat at the table.
My inner child wasn't allowed to have coffee, but she would like one right now. So we're going to break the rules for her and we're going to get it for her. So let's do that. Okay, bye.
Hey everyone, Heather and I have an ask for you. If you love this episode or if you love the IGG, can you do us a favor? We need you to go onto whatever platform you listen on and download, subscribe,
like, love, whatever it's asking you to do. Can you go do those things for us on the platforms that you listen on? It would mean so much to us.
Thanks for listening to our episode. For a way to get in touch with us, please visit our website, intuitivegirlsguide.com. We love hearing your feedback on our episodes.